get going because it's 1 minute past 3. So, guys, thank you for tuning in. It's great to see everybody. Today we've got some extra special guests with us in Lucy Brazier and Matthew Want, and I know that being a lot of our network that we look after is intrinsic in the EAPA admin support community, and these guys are right at the pinnacle of the industry in terms of what they do, the value that they provide for the industry, and their working practices, and they're kind of true flag bearers for the industry that we all love. So it's absolutely wonderful that they've given up half an hour, 45 minutes of their time to come and have a conversation with us today. So in advance, thank you so much for your time. So I just want to kind of welcome Lucy and Matthew on. Today we're going to have a really nice open conversation about how these guys work together, because I think it's very well documented that the relationship that they have as partners in terms of their working relationship is absolutely fantastic, and a real model that a lot of people can kind of work towards. So it would be really good to kind of dive into that as well. So I'm going to be posing some questions to the guys. If anyone, as Lucy has just said in the chat, if anybody's got any questions, please throw them out, and we'll put them together, and we'll all answer them as honestly and as openly as possible. But I think what would be really good to start with is a bit of an overview of you guys, how a kind of brief synopsis of your career journeys to date. I think that'd be a fantastic place to start if we could.
Who goes first? Matt, do you want to start? Do you want to talk, or shall I give Lucy an overview? All right, okay. So
go on, Lucy. You go first, and then I'll jump in. I'm happy with that.
Lovely. All right. So basically, I had been working in publishing since I was 18. I started at the local press. I then went to the Times, and I spent most of my career up until 2010 working for various consumer magazines, national newspapers, and ultimately became publishing director for a £94 million business, which specialises in legal publishing and publishing for banking. And then I burnt out in 2010, and I went home and took a settlement from the business and sat there and thought, that magazine that I've wanted to launch forever, because I had acquired a newsletter which was called Executive Secretary back in 2003, and I had run it as a newsletter for several years. But because I'd had my settlement, I was able to go, okay, let's launch it and see what happens. What I would say is that whilst in the beginning as a publisher, I looked at it and thought, well, it's a fifth of the world's working population who works in administration. That's about 500 million women and a few men worldwide. So it's obviously a really good business proposition. I very, very quickly realized that actually I had far more of a mission attached to what I was doing. And for the last 10 years, I've spent most of my life on a plane. I think last year was something ridiculous, like 42 countries and about 180 events. And I spend most of my time advocating on your behalf and speaking at events and talking to your bosses and doing a lot of work behind the scenes on how we can put recognition and career progression and all sorts of the things that I feel that you need in order to be recognized as the professionals that you are in place. So that's me. And then along the line, a year in, I met Matthew. And over to Matthew, he can tell that.
Yeah, so I think we met just before you actually got the magazine, didn't we?
Yeah.
I think we probably met. I remember it was one evening. Before I was working with Lucy, I used to work in a garden centre, and I used to work in my dad's taxi office doing the phones. And I remember one evening, Lucy came in off the train and sat there, and we got talking. And I told Lucy that I really wanted to get into events. And Lucy said to me, oh, I can do that. You know, I'm in events. I can get you into events. And in the nicest possible way, we always joke about this. Lucy went off, and I thought, who was that crazy woman? I'm probably never going to see her again, and nothing's going to come of it. A few months later, we met at a local meeting. They were putting together a local chamber of commerce. And Lucy and myself both put ourselves forward for secretary. So the first year they had a small Christmas event that was planned by the old committee. They had about 500 people under a tree singing carols. The first year we took it on, we transformed it and made it about 8,000 people under a tree. We closed out the high street, had real reindeer. At that point, Lucy, you'd had the magazine, what, just under a year, I think?
Something like that. Yeah.
And you said that you were looking for, and you said you were looking for someone to come on and do some admin. So I came on, and as they say, the rest is history.
Fantastic, fantastic. So what's interesting to me, because I did a bit of background on kind of both of you guys, kind of brief looking at past work history and what have you. So Lucy, you've never actually worked as a PA secretary before, and Matthew, this is your first secretarial PA job. Is it? I say first, but there was no kind of prior experience of that.
No, it's interesting because my assistant prior to Matthew was a lady called Elizabeth, or Bob, as she liked to be called, and she worked with me at 3 different companies, and she always used to say to me, I love the stuff that you publish, but I wish somebody would take our industry as seriously. And funnily enough, I started out my career after the local newspaper. Where I landed at the Times was on Times Creme. So I started out, for those of you that remember Times Creme, it was the section within the national newspaper that was all secretarial. So, without it being a career path, I was always very involved with this sector. And I think then the newsletter fell in my lap. It's like God was saying, okay, or the universe, or whatever you want to call it, was saying, this is where you really, really need to be involved. And so it has been. And actually, part of the reason I travel so much is so that I can talk to you all, so that I can make sure that what we're publishing and what we're talking about is absolutely relevant, and so that we know what your issues are. And then Matt, I think you're probably the most trained assistant in the world, because every time we work with people who do training, Matt goes and does the training with them. So,
yeah.
Yes,
well, especially with our executive secretary live events.
That's brilliant. I can really relate to that kind of. I find that really relatable, Lucy, in the sense of from what I do as a recruitment consultant, if you like. I've never been a secretary or PA or what have you, but this industry is kind of so ingrained in me because that's all I've ever known. So. It's nice to feel part of that community and, and try and do something and make a real positive difference where possible.
Yes, totally. But I also think, Paul, you are an amazing recruiter. I am an amazing publisher. Part of the reason that we've been an event organizer, and part of the reason we've been so successful in this market is because before we came along, on the whole, you had publishers that didn't understand the market, and you had people from within the market that didn't understand publishing. So actually, the fact that I've totally immersed myself in it and it is my world now means that it's it really, really works.
Yeah, fantastic. So we've had a couple of questions that's come through. So I'm going to try and keep on top of all of them and some of the live questions as well. So what would be good to kind of get an idea of, what does an average week look like for you both? Obviously, Lucy, you normally travel a lot, so obviously that kind of shut down. So what does the average kind of look like for you guys?
We're both laughing, and that's because there is no average week. It's just it's insane, actually. I think there's 6 of us,
especially coming up to events time.
Yeah, there's 6 of us running the entire company, and with the amount of stuff we do, we do 5 events a year, like huge conferences on different continents. We do about 60 training events a year. We put out the magazine, we publish books, and that's before we start running all the campaigns and everything we do on social media. So it's always absolutely flat out. And actually, it's a really good thing that Matt's been with me since the beginning, because I truly believe that when the partnership's right, one of you breathes in and one of you breathes out. And he almost finishes my sentences. And there are times where I'm really grumpy and he'll laugh and say, I think you need a good night's sleep. We've kind of got to a point where it really, it works extraordinarily well. But I think unless you've kind of got that rhythm, operating at that pace is very difficult. But really no week looks the same, other than the fact that I'm usually on an aeroplane and Matt's organising travel like crazy, and we're organising events and we're working around deadlines and all that stuff. But we all work remotely. Everybody in our team works remotely. I haven't seen Matt since before lockdown because he is considered to be high risk, because I don't know if you know, but he had 2 liver transplants as a kid. Oh, wow. So he is, you went out for the first time this week, didn't you, my dear?
Yeah, went out for the first time on Monday after 11 weeks. So it was nice to go out and breathe the air. And then today it's raining. So I'm not going to say any more on that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's great that you're getting to. It's great that you've got a bit of a sense of freedom. Obviously, as you guys say, no week is 2 weeks are exactly the same. But when we think about the big picture of the organisation of the events and what have you, what kind of role do you play in that, Matthew? In terms of what's your role of getting things put together and stuff?
Has he frozen?
So a lot of it is, especially with the events, Lucy will pick the speakers, so we don't have anyone speaking at any of the events that Lucy... Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Yes, yep.
Okay. So we don't have anyone speaking at the events that Lucy hasn't seen speaking. So that's the first thing that Lucy prepares. After that, I then go in and I deal with all the delegates. So I manage the bookings. I manage everything to do with the speakers when it comes to travel and that sort of side of it. Mm-hmm. Also liaising with the venue and any other venues we have. So we usually have evening events and things like that. So from start to finish, and I'm quite lucky that I get to go and travel to all the events wherever they are in the world. So getting to grab them and manage all the details, is quite interesting, especially when we're doing them in Australia and New Zealand with the time differences and the cultural differences. Learning them, and it's something I've picked up over the years. So you are able to adapt to how they do things, and with time zones as well. So when we're doing them the other side of the world, some days you'll start a bit earlier and finish a bit earlier, or however it works, just so you can make sure you're there for them at that time. And then, as Lucy said, at times we do have 4 or 5 running. So it is sometimes tough to balance all of them, but it is easier to do the further you go along. And the more I've got into it, I've been able to manage it and balance it a bit more with everything else.
Yeah, I'm always getting comments from people, though, who say if they write to Matt, he always comes straight back to them and how efficient he is, And so I guess I do the creative part of it, and I have a team of AV people that I work with who do all that side, and Matt does almost everything else. It's the ops side. I mean, I'll do marketing, I'll do the finding the speakers, I'll do the liaising with the AV team and making sure it looks like an amazing show. Matt does all the making sure that absolutely everybody is communicated with in a timely fashion and that all the detail is put in place. And that's when it really works well, isn't it? Because Matt has that eye for detail and for process and for procedure that I absolutely don't have. If you were to ask me to write a process, it would, it's just like my worst nightmare to have to start doing that stuff. And actually, I think around COVID, part of the thing that is really amazing as an opportunity for assistance is that your executives are really getting on with doing the big picture stuff and the stuff that they are paid to do. And it's a really good opportunity for you guys to step up and to do that process and procedures bit, the taming the chaos, because that's what you do, right? Everybody is in total meltdown and you're the one who's untangling it and making sure that everything is put in place. So I know a lot of you keep saying when I'm talking to you, I'm so worried because they haven't been in contact with me and I don't really know what I should be doing. I think, to make a list of the things that you feel you can do and where you can contribute and maybe what new procedures are going to be needing to be in place, and to go away and have a look at what other companies are doing and start to collate information so that when you're talking to your exec, you're able to say, hey, that's the stuff that I found. I've been working away in the background for you.
I think that's great. And going back to what you said about the kind of play into each of your strengths makes the relationship work so well. And I've seen that with my business partners that, I've got my strengths and there's other strengths which, you know, I don't know anything about accounts and, you know, bits and pieces like that. If I was in charge of that, the company would have dissolved in year 2 because
Yes.
so, you know, but as you say, you have to kind of relinquish control and pass bits over to other people, don't you? So that's clearly been the bedrock of your success, would you say, in terms of that's what makes your relationship so strong, because there is that complete trust there across the board.
Definitely. Absolutely, definitely. I mean, I can't travel to the number of countries that I travel to unless Matt runs the business while I'm away. And I have to trust him to do that. I mean, you know, not the big decision stuff, but the day-to-day running of the business, he's definitely my strategic business partner. And more often than not, when we're sitting in team meetings, you know, Matt contributes something that nobody else has thought of because he knows the business better than anybody else.
Yeah, fantastic. So you also mentioned that there's 6 of you within the business and you all work remotely. Was that a conscious decision from day one that there would be that everyone would have the different kind of working environments?
No, not really. I just remember my dad, who was a very high-powered business person, saying to me, never ever take an office until you absolutely need one. Because it all just ends up being very expensive. And so it started off with Matt, who used to come round to my house and we would pack the magazines from the kitchen table, and then I'd take a granny trolley down to the post office, you know, in the early days. And then we took on Christian, who was somebody that I'd worked with previously, who now runs my training division. And then we decided I needed an editor. Somebody, bless them, wrote on the side here, how do you have time to write the magazine when you're traveling like you do? And actually, we have contributors who write the magazine and the editor edits it, and then I do the final proofs. But, you know, but we just kind of added people on, and those people haven't really wanted to come to wherever I am, and I haven't felt the need to take on an office. We just meet once a week on a Friday and have a drink and a, hello, how is everybody? But other than that, we have a team WhatsApp group and we chat all the time, and we're very much connected and in conversation with each other, and we feel, especially through COVID, I hope you would agree, Matt, probably far more like a team than we do outside of COVID, because I'm not traveling so much. Well, certainly it feels like that to me. But I don't think there's any problem with working remotely, as long as the systems and processes are set up so that you continue to communicate and everybody understands how that's going to work. Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on that, Matthew, for people who are kind of transitioning into a remote workforce now? What would be the kind of main things that you would say, if there's anything that Lucy hasn't touched on?
I think one of the main things is, I think, as you said, through COVID, I think a lot of companies are starting to see that a lot of work can be done remotely, can be done at home. And one key thing is that Lucy will agree with any partnership is trust. You've got to ensure you have that trust there. If you don't have that, it's not going to work. And that's one thing Lucy has with myself and the rest of the team, that we have that trust there, that we know that we're working. You know, I haven't seen Lucy now for 3.5 months, but we connect every day. We talk on WhatsApp, we do Skype calls, whatever it might be. And keeping that communication, keeping that level of trust is key, you know, whether it be pre-COVID, during COVID, after COVID, whatever it might be. You've got to have that relationship. That is essential to make sure that these working relationships, especially going forward, as we don't know how long this is going to go on for. You know, I was reading the other day that some companies are saying they might not go back into the office until later this year, early next year. That's at least another 6 months. And I think it is a way of working that a lot of people are going to have to adapt to, and to have that trust there is an essential part to any working relationship.
Yeah, I think we're very lucky that we can be so open as a company, because we are so small. You know, I mean, when COVID hit, I could have furloughed people, but there was absolutely no point, because if I'd furloughed everybody, nobody would have been doing any work, and then we would have gone under, and I'd still have had to have paid their salaries and then claimed it back from the government. So we did our budget for the magazine. We worked out absolutely to the penny how much everybody had to bring in, and we've all just put our noses to the grindstone and have got on with it. And thus far, touch wood, we've managed to pay everybody on time every month, and it's, you know, we're a tiny business. But I think that level of clarity and openness means that everybody is working towards a common goal, and it's really healthy.
Yeah, very much so.
I think one thing as well to add to that is you saying about COVID. it's been able, because you've not been traveling as much, Lucy, it's meant we've been able to strip back and look at what works, you know, get back to the bare bones. And I think a lot of companies are doing that, seeing what works and doesn't work. So when we do come out of this, we're able to look at however you want to put it, a different future.
Yeah, I think that hits the nail right on the head, that most of the companies that I speak to on a daily basis, they're all investigating what changes are going to be made, and what things look like moving forward. When we're thinking about the and just kind of looking at some of the questions that come through, and this fits in really nicely actually. You're talking about developing the trust and what have you. When we think of the kind of EA and boss, I hate that kind of phrase, relationship. It's quite often difficult initially to build that trust, and sometimes executives kind of hold on to their work and a little bit protective, and it takes a little bit of time to kind of segue into that kind of trusted partner. And I think that's something that all PAs and EAs can relate to. What would you say are kind of key things to accelerate that that little bit more, and kind of reduce that time where we can grow that trust as quick as possible?
I think that it's all about communication, and I think it's how you hit it head on right from the beginning. I have a list of questions that I'm really happy to send if you want to share it with anybody, which are the questions that I would suggest you ask your executive when you first start working with them. And it's all those questions about, what are your goals this year? If this year was to be exceptionally successful for you, what does that look like? Who should I be putting through? Who should I not be putting through? Have you ever had an executive assistant before? If so, what were the things that they did that you thought were marvelous, and what were the things that you thought were terrible? Yeah. It's having a list of questions that you can go in so that you look like you're in control. I think it's really important to understand that for most executives, they don't know how to use an assistant unless they've had a particularly good one in the past. Yeah. And so they may not be sure what you're capable of. I certainly wasn't. I think we assume that management know what they're doing, but the average manager doesn't get any training till they're 42 years old. So that's a whole heap of management walking around with no clue what they're doing at all. So actually, I think if you were to take control of the situation and teach them how to use you, because I'm forever saying, don't forget that it's your business that employs you, not your executive. And your business is paying you to make sure that your executive's time is used in the best way possible. So their salary is being spent in the best way possible. You're not a gatekeeper of people, you're a gatekeeper of time. So you're constantly looking at, is that hour that they're spending the best way that they should be spending their time? Or could I be making that meeting 20 minutes and moving them on to something else so that they can actually get on with some of the work they've promised that they'll do in other meetings? Do you see what I'm saying? So I think if you start from a position of understanding that you are the expert at doing what you do, and then training them how best to use you so that the company gets the benefit, you really, really can't go wrong. The other thing I just say to you is, and then I'll hand over to Matt to stop warbling, is that on YouTube, we have a YouTube channel, and I recorded for Administrative Professionals Week a couple of weeks ago a video which is to your executives, which assistants all over the world have been sending to their executives just to say, this woman we saw on a webinar earlier this week, and we thought it might be a good way to get a conversation going between the two of us and maybe set up a meeting to chat about how I can support you better. So it's 20 minutes me talking directly to your executive, saying this is how you use your assistant properly. So if you want that, we'll send you a link to that as well.
Fantastic. And Matt, do you have anything to kind of from your perspective? Do you have any thoughts, any further thoughts on that? How to kind of bridge that gap? Oh, Matthew, you've frozen ever so slightly.
I think. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Yes.
Sorry, I think one thing is being proactive. I think that's one key and central part of building a relationship. As I mentioned before about trust, going to your boss, being proactive and saying, I can do this, this, and this. to help you with your day, to help manage your.
Well, that's a shame that he seems to be breaking up a bit. I think what he was saying is taking a proactive approach and explaining to the executive
Time will help with that trust tenfold.
Oops.
Oh. I think we're losing Matt a bit there. Was it just me, or was it everybody else?
No,
as well?
it's everybody.
Okay.
It's
Can you hear me now? I've tried to reset it.
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
So yeah, being proactive is one key thing as well. I think going to your boss and suggesting new things that you think will work for them. You know, if there's something that might not work for your executive, at least you've tried it. At least you can say you've done it, and there's no harm in trying it and then going back to how things were. So going forward, taking the bull by the horns and going to your executive and saying, look, I think we should do it this way, or can we try it this way at least, you know, as I always say, you know, you can play with something, you're not going to break it, you can always just put it back to how it was. So at least try and be proactive, go to your boss. Even if it's a 6-month plan, as I said, try it out, see how you get on, and you can always go back to the old way.
Yeah, I think overall that's amazing advice from both actually. There's been a lot of comments, Lucy, which I think you've probably seen, that people would love those tips. So I can see that you posted that from there. Are there any particular working practices that you guys have that kind of set you apart from everybody else, or are there things that you notice, Matt, that you kind of specific examples that you went to Lucy and said, hey, look, you know, we're doing something like this, how about we kind of change it to that way of working?
Definitely. So I think one key thing is when Lucy's traveling so much, there's obviously a lot of meetings involved to arrange that travel and with new clients. And one system we have in place that some of you might have heard Lucy speaking about before is when we get a meeting request in, Lucy will send it over to me or reply to them, copy me in and say, hey, yeah, I'd love to chat with you. I've copied Matt in so he can come back to you and set up a call. At the bottom of that email or somewhere in the email will be a number between 1 and 5. So that will depend on the urgency or priority that the meeting should go in the diary. So please don't look out for numbers when you're emailing us for meetings. But no, it's a great way to plan Lucy's time as well, because if there's someone that we need to get in straight away, I know. So Lucy, instead of having to come to me again and say, look, I really want this person in today, Lucy would put a 5 on it, for example. I would say, right, Lucy's got a slot today at 2 o'clock, booked in, done. And Lucy knows, hopefully knows, that once she sent it over to me, I will get onto that straight away or when I can and get that sorted for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Matt is always trying to look at ways he can make my life easier. And I think also because, as I said, time is money, ways that we can save time. And that system, that 1 to 5 system, saves so much time, because think about it. Yeah. I'm maintaining my brand. Matt picks up the request for a meeting and immediately doesn't have to come backwards and forwards having conversations with me. How important is this? When do you want to see them? When shall I slot them in? Because he can see that. It's the same as our email system. And our email system is, we have a 5-folder system. He has all my emails and he puts them all into that. It's today, this week, Matt has dealt with, to be deleted, and for your information. Yeah. And all my emails get sorted that way, so that literally all I have to deal with on a daily basis is today. And then tomorrow he'll move anything that's in this week up to today, so that I know I have to deal with it. So I went from 500 emails a day to about 30. You know, bless him. That is really, really, how shall we say, OCD. Yes. Yeah. About emails. And if he has more than 2 in his inbox, he has 46. And I got to a point where I had 25,000 unread emails, and he said, it really, if you don't do something about your emails, I may have to leave. And I said, okay, all right, we'll go for it. And we decided on the system. But he picked up all my unread emails and put them into a file called Beyond Help. And then we started again right from the beginning. But you know, it's looking at ways to speed things up. But I'll give you one more example. And this is really good example of proactivity. And I really think that the future assistant that is successful does need to be really proactive. And that is that I spoke last year at APC, which is the biggest conference for assistants in the world. I think there were 2,600 delegates at that conference last year. And there were about 50 speakers. So I got my travel itinerary. We'd all probably do that. And then I got a folder which was full of all the biogs and the photos of the speakers. Well, some of you would probably do that. And it was great because I could study those on the plane on the way over. But when I got off the plane in Vegas, I started getting messages coming in on LinkedIn saying, wow, thank you for connecting with me. I'm really looking forward to meeting you too. And off his own back, he'd gone online and he'd connected with all the speakers for that event as me and had said, I'm so looking forward to meeting you and I really hope that I can catch your presentation. Well, think what that does for my brand, think what that does for us as a business where we're all around events and speakers and all that kind of thing. It's thinking outside the box and just getting on and doing that rather than saying to me, would you like me to do that? And it really makes a huge difference that I think he knows me well enough to know that he can do that without asking, and it contributes great stuff to the business.
Fantastic. There were kind of 3 or 4 brilliant tips. The first one is so simplistic, isn't it? You know, the 1 to 5 grading.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to see what number I came in on at when we were trying to. I'm only joking. I couldn't resist it though. I couldn't resist saying that. So look, if we kind of blocked out 45 minutes for this, so we're going to come back to some people's questions in a second. So please get them through. What I'm really keen to ask both Lucy and Matt is, what does the kind of obviously the immediate future, everything's really, you know, up in the air and what have you. So we know that. But what does the future look for you guys? What are your hopes and dreams and of what you want to achieve and what have you?
Go first, Matt.
So I think, is that mainly a work side of things or personal as well, or? Yeah,
I mean, I like the idea of both, to be honest, Matt.
Yeah. Okay. Great. As I said on a call yesterday, obviously I'll be still staying with Lucy. I'm not planning to go anywhere presently. Before
that could have been really awkward.
Yeah. And before coronavirus, obviously we had a lot of events and we were talking about maybe moving to the event side a bit more, but obviously we don't know when this is going to be over and how it will look 6 months to a year's time. So I think just keeping going, just being as effective and as trustworthy as possible to Lucy, and hopefully she sees that, and just making sure I can do my best on a daily basis. I think that's just keeping up the momentum and just driving myself forward as much as I can.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's for us it was really interesting. We had London Live coming up approximately 2 weeks after we suddenly went into lockdown, and you know, people flying in from 25 countries for that conference. And at the time it was just, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? But I think we were really lucky that it was so early on, because it meant we had to turn on a sixpence and really pivot. And I know that phrase is making people laugh, but you know what I mean? We had to look at what the options were. So we launched Global, which is happening in about 2 weeks' time, which is our online conference, which is virtual, and we've got 52 speakers for that. It's looking absolutely phenomenal. We've sold about 500 places to that. So, you know, I think it's going to be amazing. So much less expensive for people to attend and so much less expensive for us to put on. Although I have to tell you, if you hadn't seen the bags under my eyes from the amount of work that it is, it's, you know, it's bonkers. But, you know, we're kind of planning for both now. So we're thinking, we don't know when the live events are going to come back. When they do, of course, we will do that. But we're taking some of our courses and recording those to go online. We've also got a couple of things coming up later in the year. We're going to do Exec Tech in September, which is 24 hours of tech training on all sorts of different things, not just Microsoft, things like Asana and Monday and Adobe and all that stuff, because you guys keep telling us that you could really do with some more tech training. So we're going to push the boat and see what we can get out of that. And then we've got something that we're calling Parallel, which is happening in November, which isn't just for assistants, but it's called Parallel because it's going to be the stories behind the people who made history. So if you look at Global, you'll see that Global hasn't got a lot of our main superstars that we quite often have. So we have Mandela's assistant speaking for us normally, and Obama's assistant, and Oprah's assistant, and all sorts of people like that. But we've got 12 people who are at that level, who have worked with some of the really most influential people of our time. And they are going to be sharing their stories in a kind of TED Talk type format with us in November. And I'm very excited about that as well. So I think we have plenty to be going along with, but mainly it's about supporting the profession, driving things forward for them. And we're very involved with World Administrators Summit, which is happening later on in the year, which is like the G8 for assistants. And the main thing that is happening with that is that 6 years ago, we started talking about career progression and how we could put together 5 different levels for the assistants across the world, which 5 was one was entry level and 5 is a seriously experienced executive assistant, and what the skill sets were that went alongside that. So we kind of started off looking at job descriptions and things, and then we came to the conclusion that that's nonsense, because every single one of you on this call will have a different job description, and the job in reality will be different. So then we started looking at skill sets, and we have come up with this system, which is about to be ratified, I think, in August, for us to start taking out to business across the world. But the heads of associations right the way across the world are involved with putting that together, and we'll then take it out to government. But the great thing about that is, once it's in place, you could be a level 5 assistant in London and decide to go work in New York, and everybody will understand what a level 5 assistant is. So if your executive's looking for somebody, they'll go, okay, these are the skill sets. Oh, that's a level 3. That's what I'm looking for. If you're going for training, you'll be able to look and think, yes, I want to get from 3 to 4, so I can go on that training. It just clarifies it, and it professionalizes it, and it means there's a proper career progression, which is what I think holds so many assistants back right now, because we found 162 job titles for this marketplace so far, and that makes for a whole heap of confusion.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting to hear, actually, because that's one of the big things that we see that we see come up from a recruitment perspective is all like the variance of job titles, and we have clients phoning us saying, "Oh, we're doing a restructure. What are your thoughts on calling people a secretary or a senior secretary, senior admin, executive assistant, or assistant, or So it's I think that would be I think that kind of the formalization, if you like, of the different roles and the structure will be wonderful for the industry.
And a whole heap of our business pool right now is consulting with companies, most of whom, I mean, we've worked with all of the big 4 this year to talk to them about how they restructure their teams and to give advice and so on. And more and more we're finding that businesses are contacting us and saying, could we just have a conversation? And we're working with their HR departments on how to restructure. But several of the really massive companies that you would all know are saying, let's wait and see what's happening with that structure that World Administrators Summit is putting in place, so that they can then implement it. And in fact, a couple of the big consultancy firms are looking at the possibility of rolling it out to their clients afterwards. So it's really exciting, because if they do that, then it becomes a situation that you have business all over the world going, well, if that's what they're recommending, that's what we should do too. Yeah. I love the fact, by the way, just some of you won't know this, but Google renamed all its assistants last year to administrative business partner for the junior ones and executive business partner for the more senior ones. And they did that because Anne Hyatt, who's their chief of staff, was tasked with employing as many men as women. And by changing the title from assistant to partner, they managed to do that last year. It's interesting, isn't it? I think assistant holds us back a bit because it suggests we're assisting and not doing.
Very much so. And it's a great insight to see what potentially the future holds, and very exciting as well. And I'm sure on behalf of the industry as a whole, thank you for all the work that you're doing to kind of promote and fly the flag. So we've had some questions covered to see how many we can kind of get through. But first one to you, Matt. Was it a steep learning curve for you when you joined the business?
Definitely, yeah. It was it was pretty much 0 to 100, wasn't it? Not in a bad way. I think it's a good way though. You know, a lot of the stuff I was speaking to someone about this the other day. A lot of the stuff that I've learned over the time working with Lucy, I've taught myself. And I've been lucky in the fact that I've got these amazing trainers and this network where I can connect to them and soak up this information that really, really helps me within my role. I remember the first day, as Lucy mentioned, when we used to sit on the floor and put the magazines in the envelopes ourselves. The first day I thought I knew it all, as many of us probably did when we were younger. So I'm sitting there, I'm printing off all the labels, put them all in the envelopes, and they don't fit. So with a little window, the addresses was just up, if I remember rightly. So what I did is I folded them all at the bottom, thinking I was clever, put them all back in. We took them down to the post office and they all dropped down. Anyway, I soon learned that I didn't know it all and it was going to be a steep learning curve. But luckily, Lucy's kept me on, and I think I've really managed to grab the role and make it my own over the years. So it's a steep learning curve, but I just grabbing everything I can see in sight when it comes to learning, being able to have this network around me and to use it to my advantage, I think has really, really helped me to boost my skills and become the EA that I am today.
Definitely. And I think the learning piece is important for every industry. And I myself was guilty of thinking the same. You know, I got to a point in my career, I know everything about recruitment, and then it just flipped on its head, and I've never learned so much in the last kind of 8 years. And, you know, incredible things have happened. So yeah, I totally get that. So we've had another...
Sorry, Paul, can I just add, sorry. I think keeping up to date with your skills, especially now, is key. The role is changing on a daily basis. You know, you think 6 months ago, none of us would have thought that we would be in this situation where most of us are working from home now, and finding new way to work with our executives and teams. So just making sure you use that network and the resources that are out there is just key.
Fantastic. So the next question coming in is, so somebody's been interviewed recently, and the interviewers seem to be a little concerned that they would that the PA would compare their amazing relationship to the previous executive company that they used to work with, and they've taken a 6-month break. So what is there any advice that you guys can give to overcome other people's opinions of them saying, oh well, you know, okay, like the comparison between the two?
I can answer that from because Matt hadn't really worked as an EA for anybody before me, but you know, Bob, who I absolutely adored, went back to New Zealand because her dad wasn't very well, and that's why I lost her, and that's why I ended up taking Matt on. And Bob and I worked in a different way to the way Matt and I do actually, but she really trained me how to use her. And I did find it very strange in the first place, having a new assistant, but I think communication, as I say, is key, asking the right questions and building the trust so that you can see that the other person has got it. And from the point of view of an assistant getting a new executive, I would be saying, you know, I want to build this into the same kind of relationship as I had with my old executive. And I know that they very much appreciated what I was able to do for them. And I'm hoping that I will be as useful to you. And I have some ideas around that. You know, be proactive, have the conversation.
Good stuff. And there's been a lot of comments about how the kind of idea for, you know, the different structures in for the assistant. One question that's been thrown out there was, are there talks for proposed salary brackets to be attached for each kind of level, or would that be more for the companies to decide?
I think we keep arguing about this. We're not quite there yet, mainly because it depends which country you're in. If you think about it, because World Administrators Summit and World Administrators Alliance is global. So, you know, we're dealing with a lot of companies in Africa and India and, you know, whatever. And so obviously the salary brackets would be very, very different there than they would be here. So I think we'll make recommendations probably as to what the percentage increase should be. to the various associations, and when they take it out within their countries, they'll be doing those recommendations. But the other thing I just wanted to say was Kay Nicholson had asked a question there and saying that it was, well, making a statement more than a question, saying this is really needed for the US, because they're, you know, for a lot of HR departments, there's just an entry level and then nobody can go up anymore. That is the way that it is in the States. And I was really shocked. I spoke to a guy that works alongside the Department of Labour in the States. And do you know that they only have one category for assistants? One. Wow. And it doesn't have a senior role as part of their profile. Now you might go, well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that when HR departments go and say, how much should we be paying our assistant? That's the level that they put in, no matter what level you are at, which is why there's nowhere to go in so many companies in the States. So that's something Bonnie Lowe-Kramer has really been working on at her end, and we're going to be publishing an article about it soon, because I think that's absolutely disgraceful that the Department of Labour in the States only has one level registered for assistants and that you can't get promoted. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Awful.
Yeah, really is. Just one last question, because I'm conscious of the time that we have booked in for this, and I think it's a really good one to ask. Somebody has asked about going back to what we were saying about keeping skills up to date. What your opinions are of the most important skills at this present moment for a PA or an EA?
Do you want to go, Matt, or do you want me to jump in?
Go on, you start off, Lucy. I'll jump in.
Okay, so my thought is that before we went into COVID, we were talking a lot about the threat behind AI, artificial intelligence, and you having problems with being retained, and whether we thought that would take away your jobs, and the press was full of all that bloody nonsense. And actually, it is total nonsense. I think there is a grain of truth in it, in that I think assistants who are purely task-based and reactive and waiting to be told what to do will eventually have those roles taken over by machines. Because if you can do the same thing twice in exactly the same way, it can be automated. Okay, I think post-COVID, you guys being proactive and driving the relationship with your executive and being able to step up and do all that process-driven stuff, but also think about other ways you can help. You know, maybe say, do you want me to put together a briefing document for you on that? Do you want me to do the background research on that? It's looking for ways that you can add value. And if you're being proactive, you're never going to be out of a job. The other thing that I would say is that the World Economic Forum published a report in 2018 called The Future of Jobs, and on it, it has the 10 skills that they think you're going to need past 2025. It sounds like a really dull report, but actually it's relatively interesting and it's not a difficult read. So go look at those top 10 skills, because what's really interesting is that where we used to really value facts, we don't do that anymore, because now you just ask Siri or Alexa. So, you know, it's about all the emotional intelligence and communication skills, and that's the stuff that you guys have in spades. It's just your total skill set. So I think the future is actually quite rosy for the profession, as long as you gather your confidence and feel that you're able to be proactive and speak up.
Fantastic. And Matt, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much training out there. Being proactive now is easier than ever. You get so many free webinars, articles, resources. It's out there at your fingertips. If there's certain courses you want to learn, now is the time. Even if you go to your boss, a lot of companies we've worked with and we've spoken to, people have gone to them and said, look, I would love to do a course on whatever it might be, because I feel it's going to help me within my role. And the company will come back and say, yeah, we'll pay half towards it, or however it will work. Don't be afraid to ask your company if there's something you want to do. You're doing it to help them, you're doing it to help your boss, and just think how much, if you go to them and say how much money they're going to save, they're more likely to say yes to you as well. Just see what resources are out there, see what you want to do, because there's something out there for everyone, and most of it, luckily, especially at the moment, is free.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, I think we could talk all day. I personally really enjoyed this. It's been lovely having you on, and I just want to say thank you so much for both of your time. I know you guys are so busy at this moment in time, so it's been a real privilege for me, and I know that a lot of our audience that we've kind of got together in our tiny little network compared to what you guys do have been really interested to hear from you. So thank you so much for coming on. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope everybody listening has enjoyed it as well.
Thank you for inviting us, Paul. It's been great. Really good fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Good
stuff. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for joining us. As you know, we've got loads of these things going on. In a few weeks' time, we're in the process of organising a kind of round table conversation, which I think is a very important conversation about the potential role changes and coming out of COVID-19, about what what the future holds for our industry. So it's something that I think is close to everyone's heart. So it's a very important conversation which we'll be advertising soon. Lucy's very kindly agreed to feature on that as well. So we're looking forward to your input on that as well. So thanks so much, everyone. I can't thank you enough. Thank you to everyone.
Pleasure. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.